All right, so a lot of people are having this discussion right now. I'm seeing these questions like, oh my God, I'm going to sell my GBTC now that it's at parity, and I'm going to buy MSTR, and I'm going to prefer MSTR over the coming Bitcoin ETFs, etc., etc. And I just want to basically talk about this, right? Because I worry that we are going to see a bunch of people who don't know what the fuck they're doing shoot themselves in the foot. So in this video, I'm not going to tell you exactly which way is right. I'm going to evaluate it the way that I would evaluate it, and then you can decide on how to actually look at it. There's a couple different things here, but again, like, this is the reason why you need to subscribe and help me spank the YouTube algorithm, because this type of thinking is what keeps people poor, as far as I'm concerned. You've got, MSTR, a fantastic company, and I made a bunch of money off of MSTR when they first announced that they were getting into the treasury was going into Bitcoin, and that was great. Now it seems a less attractive option in certain circumstances, and it can seem more attractive in other circumstances. So again, please subscribe, share the video. But really what's going on here is now MicroStrategy has announced that they've bought a few more thousand Bitcoin, and so their total Bitcoin holding is now 189,150, right? The one thing that I am not going to discuss here or debate or have the opinion or anything really, because it's way out of my pay grade, is whether MicroStrategy is a great company within the space doing good things. I'm evaluating MicroStrategy as a Bitcoin proxy, and that's the only way that I'm looking at this, right? And of course, as an investor, I need to decide what is going to be the best way for me to actually, based on the layers of risk that are involved with each option, what is the best way for me to park my capital, right? And at this point, it seems kind of crazy that people are saying, hey, I'm going to sell my GBTC as soon as it hits parity on the investment and there's no discount or no premium, and convert it to a MicroStrategy. So I want to just evaluate that here, and then you can make your own mind up and see which way you want to go with your own money. At the end of the day, I'm a capitalist. You have the right to make and lose money. And of course, you always have the right to do whatever the fuck you want to do with your money. So this is the way that I think about it. MicroStrategy's Bitcoin is currently has a market value at $42,500 of $8.05 billion. And they have a market cap of $11.137 billion. Based on the revenues that they've got, I give the business a valuation of somewhere between $1.3 and $1.5 billion. And so really, it's overvalued based on the market value of Bitcoin and the business valuation that I put on it by about 13 to 15%. Not factoring in the debt. You add the debt in, and now we're looking at an overvaluation of about 30% based on the Bitcoin that they're holding. So really, the people who are trying to, have this debate of selling GBTC, buying MicroStrategy, what they're saying is, I'm going to sell my Bitcoin at a 7% discount, which is what GBTC's discount is today, and I'm going to buy MicroStrategy or buy my Bitcoin via MicroStrategy for a 30% premium. Right, this is how $1,000 net worths are created. The better way to do it is what Saylor is doing, right? What Saylor is doing is saying, hey, MicroStrategy is currently worth 30% more than the underlying assets based on his valuation of them. So we're going to basically convert, we're going to sell some shares, we're going to raise some debt, etc., based on the valuation of that premium, and convert it to Bitcoin to acquire more Bitcoin per share of the company that we have. Makes complete sense. Makes complete, absolute sense over the long term, and depending on what time you got involved in MicroStrategy. I personally would not get involved in MicroStrategy at a 30% premium. Especially, I would not convert GBTC holding to MicroStrategy. If I had new capital, I may consider, a certain allocation to MicroStrategy because there are some benefits, and I'm going to cover that in a second. But I certainly would not be saying I'm going to sell my GBTC and get into MicroStrategy because, I don't like GBTC, or, I support Michael Saylor or whatever, even though I think he's doing a great thing and he's a pioneer in the space. The two benefits that Michael Saylor has spoken about on Bitcoin, the ETF versus MicroStrategy is twofold. Number one, they offer leverage, which they do because they can take debt, which an ETF cannot. An ETF won't be able to, take let's say the ETF has got, I don't know, 50% increase in value. They're not going to be able to take debt on that increase and then buy more Bitcoin with it, right? So in essence, your Bitcoin per share value keeps going up. That doesn't happen with the ETF. So he definitely offers leverage on Bitcoin. And number two, he gives, by owning MicroStrategy, you don't have to pay the fee that there's attached to it. However, for me, one negates the other. And if I wanted to get into a slightly more leveraged position, you really have the option between MicroStrategy and and a portfolio of Bitcoin mining stocks, in my opinion, versus so the debate here is really, MicroStrategy or Bitcoin mining stocks. It's not a debate of the Bitcoin ETF or, GBTC soon to be converted into a Bitcoin ETF, or the Bitcoin mining or MSTR. It is really about MSTR versus Bitcoin mining stocks, because in my mind, the only reason that you should be having MSTR in your portfolio is to add a leveraged return on whatever happens to Bitcoin, because he's got the leverage attached to the business, and that allows him to buy more Bitcoin, whereas an ETF would not. The no fee part doesn't make so much sense to me, because yes, there's going to be a higher fee attached to the ETF, but I'm reducing layers of risk that I have with MicroStrategy. You might be asking, what are those layers of risk? One layer of that risk is the the $1 to $1.5 billion of business valuation. If the business messes up, you're going to lose $1 to $1.5 billion in business valuation, and you're already overpaying 30 to 40%, in my opinion, per share, based on the true underlying asset, which we all know is Bitcoin. Sure, the business might do really well, but again, I'm not here to debate that. That technology side of MicroStrategy's future, etc., it's way above my pay grade, right? But really, it's the leverage. So I might say, okay, I'm going to have a portfolio 90% in the Bitcoin. Say if I'm just going to do equities, right? Of course, we all know the best way to hold it is to hold Bitcoin in cold storage. But if I'm organizing a portfolio, I might say I'm going to do 90% in the Bitcoin ETF and 10% MicroStrategy to allow a little bit of leverage hit on the overall portfolio, because the layers of risks are still there. They still have CEOs, they still have people working for them, they still have a business that generates cash flow, they still have all of these things, they still have debt outstanding, etc., etc. So I don't want anyone to get confused and think that MicroStrategy is actually an alternative to the Bitcoin ETF. It's not. It's a leverage play on it. And as Michael Saylor himself says on Bloomberg today even, which is, if you can get comfortable with our balance sheet and our capital structure, then it can offer a leveraged return on Bitcoin. Makes perfect sense to me. But for most people, you should not be thinking like that. You should not be, saying, oh, I'm going to get into MicroStrategy because I like Michael Saylor. Like, that's a dumb argument. This is a dumb way of thinking. No one is thinking like that besides the $1,000 net worthers and the $10 a month DCA gang. Even the doom and gloom boomers aren't thinking about that right now. Right? So, and the happy hippies, they're just too high. Like, they don't, they're not involved in this conversation. So, the way that I would think about it is this: by owning MicroStrategy, you've got multiple layers of risk. You've got the risk of the business, right? You've got the risk of the employees in the business. You've got the risk of the debt holders of the business, et cetera, et cetera. And on top of that, you're paying a premium to get that risk, and I wouldn't want anyone doing that. I don't want anyone selling, their GBTC. Let's say you're going to buy equivalents, right? 1 Bitcoin worth of. Well, let's just say you're going to aim to buy 1 Bitcoin. It's almost like I actually tweeted this out. Let me bring up those numbers so I get it on point. Yeah, it's almost like selling your Bitcoin right now for $39,511, and in the same instance trying to buy it back for $57,000 based on the discount of GBTC and the premium of MicroStrategy on the underlying Bitcoin. I don't think this is a good move. I certainly won't be doing it at a 30 to 40% premium. The same people that are trying to buy MicroStrategy at a 30 to 40% premium on the Bitcoin are the same people that would have a problem with buying Bitcoin through GBTC at a 30 to 40% premium. So basically what you're doing is you're admitting that you're infatuated and enamored by Michael Saylor, and that's why you're doing it. And I don't think that that's an appropriate way to think about it. Certainly not for my portfolio and my money. But as I said, I'm a capitalist, so you have the right to make and lose money. Whatever you want to do is whatever you want to do. But I do not think that MicroStrategy is an alternative to GBTC or any Bitcoin ETF, and I think Saylor would completely agree with that. I think more capital is going to come in the market, and I think MSTR may offer a leveraged, a leveraged access vehicle towards Bitcoin. But then what happens when a leveraged ETF comes out, et cetera, et cetera? So in my mind, I think you may see capital flight from MSTR as the ETF gets approved. The MSTR is obviously holding debt, which people are not factoring into it. But overall, I think there's a 30 to 40% premium attached to MSTR. And it's proven because that's why MicroStrategy themselves continue selling their stock and issuing debt in order to buy the underlying Bitcoin, right? Because if there wasn't that premium, they wouldn't be able to do that. So if they're selling their stock and raising debt on the premium that's attached to it, I don't know why anyone else would do that, right? They're trying to reduce that premium down to zero based on the amount of Bitcoin that they own, because that's how you would make money. That's why Michael Saylor is $1 billion net worther and not $1,000 net worther, because he's utilizing the markets and its discrepancies to generate extra Bitcoin for the long term. And over the long term, it might do really well. But I think selling Bitcoin for $39,500 and buying it back for $57,300, I don't think that's a really good exchange. Now, there's obviously going to be people with opinions on whether you should do this or not, and put them in the comments. But basically, my mind is very, very simple. I would not be selling GBTC at a 7% discount to acquire MicroStrategy at a 30 to 40% premium, in my opinion. I can't see how this makes any sense. If I have missed anything, I would love people to put their opinions in the comments. But overall, the fact that MicroStrategy is selling its stock, raising debt to squeeze that premium down, basically tells me that I should be doing the same thing. Although the only problem is I can't do the same thing because I'm not the company, and therefore I should stay away from it. These ETFs are going to be an absolute game changer, and they're not competing with MicroStrategy. MicroStrategy is not competing with the ETFs. The ETFs are a complete and utter revolution for Bitcoin. It is the securitization of Bitcoin, and it's going to bring demand like we've never seen before. And the smart move right now is not to convert if you own GBTC. At least in my opinion, it's not to convert GBTC into MicroStrategy unless you understand that what you are pursuing is a leveraged return. If what you are pursuing is a leveraged return on your Bitcoin portfolio, then you can argue about having a certain allocation to MicroStrategy. But to say that you think that MicroStrategy is an alternative to GBTC or any future Bitcoin ETF simply because it doesn't have a fee means you're completely disregarding the leverage risk, you're completely disregarding the business risk, you're completely disregarding every risk that comes with owning a traditional stock, right? And so yeah, I would think about that. These are my thoughts on what's going on here. I wouldn't take this action. I won't be taking this action. If MSTR ever trades at parity, I may decide to enter a position. But again, it would have to go from an $11 billion market cap to maybe like a $9.3 billion market cap in order for me to say, okay, I think it might be worth placing a trade here. And even then, I don't think it would be a long-term trade. But the good news is, despite all of this, there are still only 3 rules to Bitcoin. Actually, I should probably add another rule. We need to subscribe because we're not spanking this YouTube algorithm hard enough to get Bitcoin content out in front of people. I was having this conversation today, and the reason I wanted to talk about this today is I don't want people sitting here going, hey, I just traded in my Bitcoin for a 7% discount only to try and buy it for a 40% premium because I'm trying to save a 0.7% per year fee, or whatever the ETF's fee is, right? It sounds stupid. It just sounds stupid as hell to me. So I hope this gives you something to think about. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments. But ultimately, there's always only 3 rules to Bitcoin. Step number 1, you buy Bitcoin. Step number 2, shut the fuck up. And step number 3, you get fabulously wealthy.